Hello everyone and welcome back for some more freshly brewed drag tea. Today I have with me a hilarious Kiwi queen who charmed us all with her big smile and cheeky sense of humour when she appeared on Drag Race Down Under Season 1. I'm super excited for you all to get to know her better and learn about her amazing journey in drag. We'll of course be talking all things Drag Race and I'll be asking some of the great questions you all sent in. Please join me in welcoming the lovable and amazing Anita Wigl'it!
Oh, that was such a beautiful entrance tagline. Thank you so much.
Well, I think you deserve it. I loved you on the show and I thought you were so funny, and I think everyone agreed that you were sort of the funny, warm, lovable one who went too soon.
Oh, thank you. So gone but not forgotten.
Never forgotten. I'm loving the wig, by the way. It's great. It's serving me kind of like tentacles or something.
Well, luckily I've got my tentacle tucked firmly away between my legs today, because that would be a different sort of show. But thank you so much. This was actually we touched on it before we started recording. That was as glamorous as it is. It was sort of out of laziness because I didn't have to glue a wig on. So it's currently while we're filming this, it's 11:30 p.m. at night here. So we are at the time zones. So I've just been doing a drag thing at my dinner theatre that I work at tonight. So I was like, well, what can I put on that's like a Jessica? So I've got sweatpants on, but don't tell the viewers about that, okay?
Well, I think you look amazing. I love the wig. I think it fits with your kind of like shiny, sparkly personality. And thank you so much for obviously staying up this late to do the interview.
My pleasure. I had a late afternoon coffee and probably far too much alcohol, so it just really helps.
Well, thank you so much, and obviously I hope you stay awake during the interview. So I know obviously my audience were really excited to hear from you and hear about obviously your career and obviously Drag Race and everything.
Sorry.
So let's see if we can ask you some questions to wake you up. So I was wondering if you could sort of talk to me a little bit about how you got started in drag. I actually read online, which I didn't know before, that you were actually born in England and you moved to New Zealand when you were 10?
That's correct. So I was born in Somerset, land of the cider, and I was born in Yeovil, which I always thought was wonderful and so glamorous sounding. But apparently, I'm not sure if this is true, but it was the heroin capital of the UK for a time. So my family swiftly moved to Cheshire, and I lived in a little town called Nantwich there, which was a very small town where everyone knew each other. So in 1999, in November, when I was 10, shows my age, we moved to New Zealand, and I've been here. I had a 2-year stint in Vancouver, Canada. But apart from that, I've been spent the two-thirds even of my life. If I could do maths, I wouldn't be a drag queen. 2/3 of my life in New Zealand now, so it's my home, and I love being down under.
Yeah, I mean, because I was surprised because you don't have a lick of an English accent. You sound very Kiwi, so that's why I was sort of like, because you were kind of like 10 years old. I guess that's like a third of your life in England, so I was quite surprised.
Yeah, it's funny. I think when I moved over here, I still had an accent, obviously, but I think because I sort of joined in my last year of primary school and then went to high school, and I think when you're at that age, being so young, you kind of pick up things from other people. So I just kind of, my English accent disappeared. But it's funny now, some people in New Zealand will go, oh, you've still got a little bit of an accent. I'm like, really?
I don't, well, to my ears, you don't really, but, you know. So how did you actually get started in drag then?
Good question. So, now, as a good homosexual, when I was studying at university, I got a job at the theatres here, working as an usher and a bartender, and I just loved that job. I was actually with that company for 10 years in the end. But the first musical I worked on in 2008. So in New Zealand, we're quite small in Auckland. We've got a population of about 1.5 million, and it sort of can support 2, or at least in those days, used to be able to support 2 big musicals a year. And the first one I worked on was none other than Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the musical, or if you're dyslexic, Priscilla, Queen of the Desserts. And it was so much fun. I saw my first drag queen, and I was so inspired that I decided to dress in drag for a staff Christmas party at the end of the year. And I also decided to have a drag queen Priscilla-themed 21st birthday party when I did my first show. And I'm just about to turn 33. So how many years ago was that? 12 years? Is that right? Did I do that right? 12-ish years. And the rest has just been history, as they say. And probably, let's be honest, a bit of a mistake.
No, it wasn't a mistake. I loved you on Drag Race. You were so fun, and obviously, I'm so glad that you were in drag and that you went to the theatre company and did Priscilla, Queen of the Desert or Dessert, whichever way you say it. And one thing I think some people may know this or not, but actually, obviously, we all know from the show that you and Keita are kind of a duo. But before Drag Race, you two actually had your own show that premiered several years before Drag Race and had 2 seasons called House of Drag. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you could sort of tell me a bit, because that was kind of effectively your version of Drag Race before Drag Race came down under, right?
It really was. It was basically, completely honestly, again, keep this off record so the fans don't hear, a complete knockoff of RuPaul's Drag Race. So this was before we had, now I think if my memory serves me right, we always had the American version of RuPaul's Drag Race and then the All-Stars. And I think UK Series 1 was the first international sort of franchise. And so at that point, I believe we'd already done our 2 series of House of Drag. So we thought RuPaul's never going to come down under. So basically, Keita and I, we have a show that we do once a month called Drag Wars, which is basically an amateur drag competition where people, young performers, get on the stage, no matter if they're a drag king, a drag queen, or whatever in between, and they get on stage and they just have a place to perform. Because it's kind of hard in New Zealand, so our options are either Drag Wars or in a club or a dinner theatre. And often it's quite hard to get a booking at a club for a while. So we thought if they get paid for it and all that sort of stuff, we love working together. And one day, a lovely lady named Amanda Payne came into the audience and she saw us together and thought, these 2 tits would make a great TV show. Well, we use the word great very loosely. And so House of Drag was born, which was sort of a cross between Drag Race in that contestants do challenges each week and it'll test something about drag, whether it's comedy or design. And then it was a combination between Drag Race and Big Brother. So they all lived in a house together. And the drama ensued, and it was just so much fun. The sort of the twist on that one, though, was that Keita and I would choose the top 2 and announce a winner, and then the winner would then get to choose who was in the bottom 2, and then Keita and I would send the loser home, essentially. So it created all sorts of drama, and then somebody's best friend would get sent home, and then they've got to sleep in a room with like 8 beds together. So it was so fun, and we were drunk half the time, so it was really wonderful to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard of the show, but we didn't get it in the UK, as in we didn't. So the other day, I got a VPN and I changed my location to New Zealand and I started watching the 2nd season, which was the only one I could find that was available. And I started watching the first couple of episodes. It was so funny. And like, there was a bit where you and Keita were pretending to be like pigs and you were holding drinks in the mud. It was so bizarre, but funny. And then you were just, you were so funny. I loved it.
Thank you. There's a good story behind that one. So Keita and I, we were dressed as pigs, and quite accurately, and we were filming at this beautiful house in Auckland, and it was like multi-million-dollar. They rented it, and obviously we didn't buy it, not with our budget. And there was sort of like the property. It was quite rural, so there was this pond that was full of mud, and we thought we've got to dress like pigs and roll around like pigs in their poo, basically. But it wasn't. We were rolling around, and it wasn't until after we'd sort of filmed that we kind of were thinking about it. And in New Zealand, sometimes in rural houses are not connected to the sewage system. And so we were like, was this an effluent pond? And I think it probably was. So we were literally pigs rolling around it, basically.
Well, I mean, the glamour of it all.
And the funny thing is with Keita, after we filmed that, Keita has never smelt better in her life.
Yeah, you two were just so. I loved because on Drag Race Down Under, we didn't get to see as much the actual interaction between you and Keita, but on House of Drag, you really did see you two almost quite like riffing off each other and being sort of like almost the traditional drag queens who are quite kind of like snippy, but in a funny way, like a loving way. You could tell you two love each other. What can you sort of tell me a little bit about how you and Keita got started?
Yeah, Basically, we both started drag around the same time. I'd started because of Priscilla, and Kita, she was a Halloween drag queen, and so she dressed up at Halloween. We both contacted our local gay club in Auckland called Family, and we said, look, we're these young queens individually, and we're like, we love to do comedy shows, so we would bump into each other a little bit in our early days. And I just remember her having such a beautiful heart and a warmness about her. She was just so lovely. I remember once we finished it, because in Auckland our shows are 1 a.m, so we'd done a 1 a.m. show, and she drove me home all the way back to Takapuna, which was where I used to live, which is a good sort of 15-20 minute drive for the city, and she was just so caring. And when I went to Canada for a couple of years in Vancouver to do some studies at university, when I came back and we started Drag Wars, that was when I was like, oh, I really love this drag queen. She's always been so fun. I want to do Drag Wars. We would kind of keep in touch, and then our sort of professional relationship started from there.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it was really cool because on the show, they did obviously talk about the fact that you were a duo, but actually they didn't quite touch on it that much. It was kind of, they talked a little bit about you two and then obviously Elektra, but they didn't quite sort of talk about it. But I guess in a way, maybe that was a good thing because it meant that you got to shine on your own.
Yes, and that was the thing. So Kita and I, we were so used to being a duo and doing everything together. So if you can hear a dog barking, unfortunately, that is my waking up all the neighbours. So because we've always done something as a duo, when we went onto Drag Race, I knew that it was kind of like, as much as I love Kita and as much as I love working in a duo, and I always will, it was sort of our time individually to shine. And Kita's always sort of been, because Kita hasn't left New Zealand, she was always sort of had a few more opportunities than I did, just because she was in sort of more circles than I was, because I went to Canada. And so I thought, well, this is my time to show. Instead of Kita and Anita, maybe it can be Anita and Kita. Turns out I was wrong. But so I thought I would sort of try and like separate myself a little bit and kind of show the world that I can be just as sort of fun on my own, and that Kita can be fun on her own too. And it worked. I think that now the sadness is we haven't been able to showcase as much our duo.
Yeah, I think it was great that it was a fun interaction, but I quite liked that they kept you separate, not kept you separate, but as in your storylines weren't always intermingled, and it was nice then seeing House of Drag, because obviously you two there are a duo, so it was nice to see the kind of double side of it.
Yeah.
One question I kind of had was, obviously on Drag Race, the way they showed it was when they made it look like you two didn't know that each other were on the show. Is that true, or did you know?
We absolutely didn't know we were on the show together. But it was hard for Kita and I. So technically no, but absolutely yes, because we own a business together, Calypso Drag Queen Dinner Theatre in Auckland. And so it's like, why are you taking so many weeks off work? And why am I taking so many weeks off work at the same time? And because we've got the same costume designers. And you sometimes don't have to have a conversation like, hello, I'm doing Drag Race Down Under, are you? Because it's sort of like our costume designer's booked for so many weeks. Like, damn it, what am I going to do now? And then she's taking this time off. So it was kind of super obvious in the end that we were both doing it. So, and of course, you kind of, when you go on TV, you don't want the world or the producers to realize that you figured it out. So you're like, oh my gosh, you're here? You're like, I knew you were going to be here, because you have no plane tickets booked for anything.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that might be the case, because obviously you two actually own a business together, so it's kind of obvious. And it's such a small country that I guess there's only so many, especially within just the city of Auckland, I guess there's probably not that many costume designers or whatever, so it's kind of obvious.
But it was a love vibe.
So what did it feel like then, talking of Drag Race, what did it feel like when you got the call to say that you got the job to be on Drag Race?
You know, so many people ask me this question, and it's a great question, but I'm so stupid that I didn't realize that I was actually on Drag Race. So what happened was, for me, so Amanda Payne, who I talked about before, who did House of Drag with us with Warner Brothers, she was the producer for Drag Race Down Under 2. So I sort of did my audition, if you like, my audition video, and sort of I was sent sort of like thank you for your audition. We'll get back to you about the results and yada yada yada. And then it was sort of like an email like, these are the dates of the filming, and we'll let you know the costume list. I'm like, okay, good to know. They're like, here's your costume list. You've got so many weeks to prepare for it. I'm like, okay, great. So I had to message him and I said, like, am I on the show? She's like, yeah, you are. I'm like, oh, great, thank you for the call. So it was sort of like such an anticlimax because it should have been so obvious for me. But I was like, I don't know. Are they just sending me a costume list just in case?
Well, that's funny though. That's not. I guess it's nice in a way that it was kind of like a genuine surprise for you.
Absolutely, but it was. I never got that like yes, like hello Anita, this is RuPaul calling you to tell you you're on Drag Race. Like what? It was I had to figure it out for myself, but it was such a delight to be part of the show and such an honor, I think, as well. It's sort of being on the show is obviously so good for those who go on the show for their careers because it gives you a larger audience, much like it's such an honor to be on your video today because it's sort of introducing me to an audience that might not know me already or people get to know more about me. But also it's an honor because to be on Drag Race because it's sort of like you're validated that you've been doing drag for 11 years or however long you've been doing it. And you've worked and you've worked and you've worked. You put yourself out there. You've created shows. And now it's like, you're good enough to be on the show. You're here now. I was like, oh, thank you. Apart from me, it should have been like, but get a sewing machine and learn how to sew before you come on.
Yeah, I think it was great. I loved seeing you on there and it was really fun. And what I kind of then was thinking, once I sort of saw about House of Drag, and obviously you and Keita were the kind of effectively the RuPauls. What was it like then going onto a show where you were a contestant rather than a judge?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So between us, being a judge is where it's at because you're like, I know I'm going to be on all of these episodes. You can factor it into your calendar well. You know you're going to use all of your costumes. And it's so nice. You see the contestants sweating it out. And we, because on House of Drag, the contestants were not encouraged to, but they were allowed to drink alcohol because it was sort of like, oh, you're in the house and a bit zesty. And so us as the judges, we had this joke that we would drink champagne that was continuity. So every time they would cut, we'd be like, continuity to refill our glasses. So we had so much fun doing it. And it was just like such a joy, no stress really. And then going from that to being a contestant, oh God, and it's sort of, because it's hard. Like, in drag, I'm not so sure about other parts of the world, but at least in New Zealand, we don't really do too much celebrity impersonation drag, let alone try and talk and act like them in a comedy challenge. And we don't, sometimes we like, I'm not a sewer, it might be obvious, but it's sort of like, it's not, we're not generally good at everything. Even those that win the competition can be in the bottom for something. So it's sort of stressful being a contestant. And what was really funny, so Elektra Shock, who is in Drag Race Down Under, she was a contestant on House of Drag, and then we were contestants together, and I was meant to do another show called Dancing with the Stars, which I think you have a similar version of where you are, and she was a judge, so she would have been judging me, and I would have been a contestant, so it was like our career trajectory, she's gone up and I've gone down.
Oh no! It was really fun, I think, to have all three of you on the show. And like I said, when I started watching House of Drag, and then she came on as a contestant, I was like, "Oh, I know her," and it was really fun.
I know that old man.
It was really fun to have all three of you on, and obviously, you already knew Keita and Elektra. Did you, when you walked in, did you know anyone else from the cast?
Yeah, so Art Simone and Jojo Zaho, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else in the cast. I think just those two. We did a festival called Broken Heel, which was a Priscilla festival in Australia before COVID kind of got crazy. So I knew that not super duper well, but I knew them enough to be like, hello. The other ones, not so much, actually. I've heard of all of them, but it was kind of I knew that they were going to be there because you just think, oh, Karen for Finance, she's got to be there, hasn't she? And like Coco Jumbo, Maxi Shields, that sort of Australian drag icon. So it was so exciting for me to meet them and kind of not only meet them, but sort of be on them at least for the first episode on the same level as they were, and kind of be like, oh my gosh, like you're Maxi Shields, you're Art Simone, and be like, we're in this together. I'm one of you. It felt very sort of good for the resume.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to hear that you obviously, I guess, the New Zealand, there were only 3 Kiwi queens and the rest were were Australian. Do you often find that, because obviously when we think here down under, most people do think of Australia rather than New Zealand. Do you find that quite often you're kind of lumped in with Australia?
all the time. Oh my God. When I lived in Canada, I'm from New Zealand. Like, oh, what part of Australia is that? Or like, how long does it take to drive from New Zealand to Australia? It's like, if you have a submarine, maybe a couple a day. But, so it's quite, but for me, it's fun. It's sort of like, the difference that we find here is sort of between America and Canada, but, and it's not funny because America and Canada being literally connected, but so different. And we've got quite like a 3-hour flight, I think, from Auckland to get to Sydney. So we are quite separate, but it's fine. It's nice. It's just nice to be included in Drag Race, really. So if people think I'm from Australia, then so be it.
Well, you are wearing kind of, green kiwi, maybe that the wig, maybe that.
That's totally why I wore this. I like it. We'll go with that.
And so obviously on the show, I thought you did so well, and I think you absolutely smashed all of the episodes that you were on, like especially, let's talk about Snatch Game. So obviously, spoiler alert, you won Snatch Game with your amazing portrayal of Queen Elizabeth. I was just wondering what kind of led you to picking her as the person you wanted to impersonate, because I actually thought that was a really smart decision. I was really surprised no one else had ever done it.
Oh, thank you. I know, the first smart decision I've ever made in my life, really. So for me, I feel like the key people, there's two options really for Snatch Game. I think you've either got to go with somebody who nobody knows anything about, because then you can make up your own narrative, or somebody that's so well known that there's so much sort of repertoire to joke about. So for me, the Queen was perfect because not only is she old, which can be quite funny, but she's also she at the time had an elderly husband who was quite funny, obviously a bag of jokes and that sort of stuff. And she's got her dog. She writes letters for when people turn 100. She does all these ceremonies with a sword, and there's all that kind of the controversy of some of the royals getting knocked off and things like that. Don't get me started on Prince Andrew. So there's a lot of material, and for me it was sort of comfortable. So then when there was a question, it's like, okay, well, which sort of joke about this area can fit into this? And some of them, like the dry ass pussy joke, was completely off cuff.
Because when you get older, things start to get a bit tighter in your DAP, dry ass pussy. It's like granola down there these days.
Because I panicked and didn't know what to write. But it was just, it was something that I was able to be kind of well researched with, I guess. And I just had so much fun. Even though, for me, it was hard. I love the Queen and I love the royal family. And one of my sort of career aspirations is one day to receive a knighthood or a dameship or whatever it's called for services to the theatrical community. And that's gone out the bloody window now. But I just had so much fun being that cute old lady.
It was so funny. I thought you smashed it. Your jokes were funny. You were on point. I thought all of your jokes were just so clever but funny because, like you said, everyone knows the Queen. She's probably one of the most famous people in the world, even if you're not from the UK. One thing I actually was really curious about was on the Snatch Game. To me, it was quite obvious watching it that you were clearly going to win, right? Because you were the best. On the show, they made it look like all of the people thought that Snatch Game went so well. It was one of the best Snatch Games ever. And then when it came to judging, it kind of appeared that RuPaul didn't quite share that opinion. Was that actually what happened?
So how do you girls think Snatch Game went yesterday?
Do you know what, I feel like that is probably one of the strongest Snatch Games there has ever been on Drag Race.
Wow, really?
This was a very interesting Snatch Game. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. So we got off the Snatch Game stage and we're walking from the main stage to the holding room before going back into the workroom. And I was like, wow, that was such a good Snatch Game. It was really strong. Everybody was so good. And I was kind of like, I was so petrified throughout the whole of Snatch Game because it's sort of something that I do comedy for a living, but it's something that's so out of my comfort zone, pretending to be someone else and doing accents and things like that. I love doing it, but it's not like my everyday thing. So I was thinking like, oh, I don't know how to win. And Keita whispered to me, she goes, you've won. And I was like, I don't know how. And then so we were all like, oh, well, we feel pretty good about that. And then people were like, oh yeah. And like, I don't know, Art might have been saying like, oh yeah, I did pretty well with that. I'm really happy with how that. I'm like, oh damn, I don't know if I won. And then we get into the main stage and Rue's basically like, Anita Wigl'it, congratulations, you won. And I was like, oh, what about the tops and the bottoms stuff? And basically a couple were safe, but everyone was in the bottom. It's like, worst Snatch Game ever. And everybody was quite surprised, really. And then afterwards, like, oh, yes, it was different. That was a terrible Snatch Game. Like, it went quite well for me.
Well, that's really interesting to hear, I guess, because obviously the way, I guess a lot of it comes down to editing and the way they show it. I think you were clearly the winner. Like, you were amazing. You were so funny. It was so obvious that you were going to win because you were so good. I think some of the other people did okay, but I think some of the choices of the people were quite unusual. When watching it on TV, did you change your opinion and sort of think, oh yeah, it wasn't that good? Or did you maintain that you still think it's good?
Oh, it's funny. I thought that there were some absolute shining moments. Like, I know it's super controversial, but et cetera, did. Oh, I can't remember her name, but the Dingo Stole My Baby. And then she had this one, which was Dingo Stole My Answer. And her acting, when it came to like, she's like, there's a dingo. Oh, I was trying so hard not to laugh because I was desperately trying to stay in character. But I just lost the plot with that one. And there were just some really funny sort of moments. And there was one with Maxie Shields as Magda, I can't remember, Szymanski, I think. It didn't make it to the show, unfortunately, but it was so funny. And there were just some brilliant moments. So it's hard. It's always hard when you see people when they're disappointed as well, because it's like, this is so hard, and you've all done a brilliant job. It's just like, it's really hard, and just some was sort of better than others, and it's a tough game.
It is. I think Snatch Game is definitely one of the hardest challenges, especially if you're not used to doing improv and comedy impersonation. But obviously, you were clearly the winner. Like, you were great. So I think you should be paid to come and be the queen. Like, that would be amazing.
I would love that. I think it would be, because she hasn't been very well lately, so I could be a stunt double.
True. I mean, they just put you in a bit of makeup and like, with the handbag and everything. They'd never know the difference.
Like, I could have done her Jubilee.
Yeah, you could have done it, and we could have heard some dry ass P-word jokes. Like, that would have been so funny.
We certainly could. That would have been great. Well, maybe I'll say like, look, Lizzie, if you get to 71, just give me a call and I'll help you out.
And so obviously, so you won Snatch Game. So you're actually, this kind of brings me on to your track record was actually really good. Like, you only fell in the bottom once, really, like quite early on, even though you had a win under your belt. So going into obviously episode 4, which was the sewing challenge, and they wheeled out, and you'd been safe and all won every other, and they sort of wheeled out the what do you call it? The dumpster? I don't know what you call it I call it a skip in the UK. But
yeah, we call it a skip as well.
Okay, that's what we call it. Or like a dumpster, I think the Americans call it. So inside was obviously all these crappy materials, as well as another surprise, which was Art Simone, who had been eliminated 2 episodes before.
Yes.
So I just want to know, did you know that was coming, or was it a total surprise?
Such a surprise. So Art Simone is one of the most famous drag queens in Australasia, really. I think Courtney Act is sort of the highest followed, and then Art Simone is sort of right under her. And so when Art Simone got eliminated in week 2, it was so devastating really fast, but she was so emotional. And I was crying as well, and thinking like, just because I know Art, not super well, but I know her enough to know what an absolutely amazing drag queen she is, and how much effort she puts into everything she does, and she's so successful, and she deserves it. And to see her go home on week 2, I was like, what? This can't happen. This is Art Simone. So when she came back, part of me was like, yes, she's back. I'm so happy for her. But then the other part of me was thinking like, damn, she's back, because she's such a strong competitor, because she has these incredible looks, this outrageous personality, and so I was sort of like, equally, it was such a weird split of like thrilled, but also extremely like, damn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was really surprised. I think most people were surprised when she got eliminated in episode 2, because she had such a reputation. One thing I wanted to ask you was, there is a rumour on the internet, several rumours, because people always wondered why she came back, because it never was really explained.
To be fair, That's mostly true.
So there was rumours that apparently they lost the footage of her elimination or her lip sync and they had to redo it, which is why they brought her back. Can you confirm or deny?
Well, honestly, I don't think that would be the reason she brought her back. I think the reason why they brought her back, in my opinion, so we technically don't know the answer. So I think what happened, because I was a producer on House of Drags, I'll put my producer hat on. Well, at least I claim producer titles. I didn't do anything for it. But I think Art Simone is so popular that I think that if I was producing the show, I would have brought her back just because I would have felt like the Australian audience at least would really want to see her in the show and do well. I think she would bring a lot of viewers to the show. So I think that maybe she was eliminated. It's hard to know if she was eliminated sort of fairly or unfairly in week 2. We'll never know that. But I think that she was sort of brought back because she's just such a staple in the Australian drag community. And she was people for years before even Drag Race Down Under was announced. Like, Art Simone will host RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under. She's that sort of prominent here. So I think it probably had a little bit to do with that, really.
Yeah, I always assumed that because some people were saying that obviously because Coco Jumbo obviously technically lasted longer, but she wasn't brought back. So some people were obviously saying that was unfair. And I think when I was looking at the situation, obviously whether you agree with it or not, I can see that she obviously had the higher profile. So when they brought her back, I wasn't surprised because she's not only has a high profile, but she's also she's funny, but she's also quite kind of controversial a little bit. So it makes for good TV. I can kind of see that is maybe the reason.
Totally. The only thing that my biggest regret though from that episode, because that was when I got eliminated in, and we had to use things from the dumpster, and I just wish in hindsight that I used Art Simone as my costume. And she would make an excellent skin suit, and she's so into horror she'd probably be really into it.
That's a great idea. Use all the trash, including Art Simone.
No, they couldn't have told me off for it.
So obviously we were talking about Art Simone and that episode came back and then you were unfortunately eliminated that episode.
Yes.
Were you surprised that you were in the bottom given your track record, and also do you think you deserved to be in the bottom that week?
Such a good question. I wouldn't say I was surprised to be in the bottom with my dress that I made. I'm still confused to this day about that dress. Part of me really likes it, and part of me just is like, what is it? I think it kind of just didn't fit very well, but the concept I think kind of works. But I was not surprised to be in the bottom, and I guess not surprised to be going home either. I think because Karen from Finance is such a prominent, again, she's probably the, under Art Simone would be the next most popular sort of biggest followed drag queen in Australia. And so I thought, just before the music started for our lip sync battle, I thought, this is my time to go home. Karen's got this. I put the effort in that I would anyway. But it was sort of, I just knew it wasn't my time, I guess. And so I was sort of really devastated to be going home because we touched on before, on paper, I was technically winning up until that point because I've been safe. Won, and then I was in the top, and then I was sent home. So I was technically winning, and I was so happy because in life, because Keita and I are a duo, often like Trixie and Katja, Bendela Creme and Jinx, people, without meaning to, kind of often sort of compare them a little bit, and they have their favourite and things like that. And for years, sort of Keita, because he had sort of a bigger fan following in New Zealand, it was always sort of like, the better one, and Anita was kind of like her backup. And so for me, it was such an opportunity to be like, wow, I'm up here and I'm beating Keita. This is awesome. I'm showing the world. So it was just so unfortunate, really. So since then, I did take some sewing lessons. So at least I'm a little bit better with a needle and thread. It's just the way it went, and everything happens for a reason. And I'm sure one day I'll realize what that reason was.
Well, I first of all, I always thought your book look was, it wasn't the best, but it certainly was not bad. I actually thought it was nice. I'm not a drag queen or in any way have fashion sense, but I was like, that's a good outfit. I couldn't do that.
No, it was a lot of hot glue and a lot of rushing to get through it.
Hot glue and desperation.
Exactly. I think like, the thing is that with a design challenge or any challenge, as long as you don't sort of utterly embarrass yourself and do something like, I can't remember what the thing, and not that she embarrassed herself, but the poor one in the UK who stuck the paper bags on a leotard and kind of called it a day. At least it wasn't paper bags on a leotard. It was just paper books on a tube.
No, I thought it was good. I was so surprised. Your elimination was actually the most shocking to me. Maybe Art Simone as well, because it was so good. But because you had actually won an episode, and like you said, you were either safe or in the top, your elimination was the most shocking to me as a viewer. Because also, you just seemed so nice. And I was like, oh no, I liked her. She was really funny.
Oh, thank you.
I know lots of people in the comments didn't even have a question for you. They basically just wanted to say you weren't deserving of being in the bottom.
Oh. Thank you.
So how did it then feel to be eliminated while Keita was like you talked about obviously the comparison, and I don't think you are in any way like the worst one, so you can get that idea out of your head. I think you are just as good. Like you're both amazing. What did it feel like to then know you were in the like going home and you still had two people in the competition who were your sort of partners?
Yeah, it never feels good, I don't think, unless you send yourself home. Then even then, it probably wouldn't feel good. It was sort of part of me was sort of very proud for getting halfway through the season, and also because you never want to go home first or second, really. As long as you get over the first 2 episode hump, then you're pretty much going to get some good airtime. You're kind of gonna sort of have some sort of follow on, hopefully, from the show. So part of me was really proud for representing. I was really proud. I kind of gone in. And I, in a way, it achieved what I wanted to do. I wanted to share some stories and have some soft moments, because everybody loves a crier. I wanted to win Snatch Game, and I just kind of then I wanted to win the crown, basically. So 2 out of 3 is not bad, is it?
Definitely. I think you definitely made your mark on the competition. No one can forget your, what was it, RuPaul called it, like your maniacal smile, your manic.
It's nothing as much as age, really.
But it was you were really fun. And like, also, you were, after the show, you were unofficially elected as the Miss Congeniality. So I think people obviously remembered you and obviously felt that kind of warmth and, you know, that smile and like sort of your congeniality, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, I think around the world, we see a lot of things, especially on Drag Race. There's a lot of sort of arguments between the queens, and it's so exciting to watch. I mean, who doesn't love a little bit of a catfight on TV? But for me, I'm just so not that person. I think coming from a small country and in a smaller city and then a smaller scene, let alone being a drag queen on top of that, you kind of have to be sort of very professional and very nice to everyone. Well, I'd like to be nice to anyone anyway, but in order to get work, we did have to be sort of nice and not be bitchy and that sort of stuff. So for me, I just kind of took that energy in with me to the show. I just thought, like, I could be, like, well, I couldn't really. I thought you could be sort of bitchy for the TV, and I remember being on the show and thought, oh, I'm probably not going to be very successful because, like, all these girls, they're sort of arguing with each other and they're all having these shady moments. I'm shady to my friends and people that I feel comfortable with, and I love shade, but I just thought, oh, I'm not going to have these conversations with people because that's not who I am. And then actually what was fun after the show, it was sort of the opposite happened because I wasn't bitchy to other people and because I was just trying to be nice to people. I think the audience enjoyed that because it was a bit refreshing for them.
Definitely. You were definitely the nice one. Like, I mean, all of them, it's shade for TV. I'm sure none of them are like actually horrible in real life. But you were definitely... But definitely you were the nice one. And I think there were a few times where, at least on the show, people would say, oh, who would win between you and Keita? And they always sort of showed Keita as being the more shady one, and then you were the kind of the nice one that never really said anything. Is that really what your relationship is like? Or was that sort of more for the camera, do you think?
So, Anita.
Yeah?
If you're both in the bottom 2 today, who's going home?
Well, that'll just depend on the lip sync song.
Keita.
Yeah?
Who's going home?
Anita?
It is, I think, yes and no. It's funny that when Keita and I are together, usually we are just like, oh, we are so like shady towards each other, especially when we're hosting something together, just because it's just so much fun and it's such a safe space between us. But then to people that I'm not very familiar with, like, on camera in front of the world, or even on Drag Race in front of some queens that I don't really know, if they're sort of like, who's funnier between you and Keita? It's sort of like, well, we kind of both have our own areas, but if it's Keita and me, I'll be like, no, I'm definitely funnier, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I suppose we're absolute bitches, and if you get to see it, if you saw our chat that we have on Facebook together or on WhatsApp or anything, and the things that we say to each other, it's just horrific. But we do have a lot of fun.
Yeah, you could tell there was a lot of love there, and it kind of came from like a funny, especially, and also on like House of Drag, your interactions were definitely a lot kind of cattier, but in a funny way. And that was really nice. I thought that was really sort of, you could tell there was a mutual respect that allows you to do that.
Definitely, we just have a habit of finding each other's like most sensitive topics and then bringing them up on stage in front of an audience, but in like a weird, twisted show, and it is just so funny. But because we it's impossible for Keita and I to get offended, especially with each other. So my gosh, we've had some fun times over the years.
I'm sure they could have a whole documentary about it.
It would have to be at 1 a.m. because it would be definitely R18.
Well, maybe one day, who knows?
Fingers crossed, the Keita and Anita show taking the world by storm.
And so, obviously, on the show, one of the things also that was not only you and Keita, because obviously you're a duo, but also Elektra, was, so they didn't talk about that they talked about the fact that she worked for you, not that she was a contestant on the show that you had previously hosted. But what was it like having Elektra on the show? Because I assume, obviously, you know her well, but she is technically kind of your employee. What was it like having her on the show and also kind of doing better than you in terms of the track record?
It was great while I was on the show because I could boss around just like that. No, it was interesting going into at Congeniality. So Congeniality's a drag queen dinner theatre in Auckland that's been around for 26 years this year, which is quite outrageous. And so Keita and I, we've co-owned it for about 6 years, and it's honestly, because I didn't start it and because I haven't worked there for most of its life, I can honestly, hand on my heart, say it's just one of the most amazing places in the world that I've ever been to. It's just like the way the night runs. It's so like the drag queens are the waitresses, and it's so personal. And that's no thanks to myself or Keita. That's the way it's been for so many years. And it's just incredible. So Keita and I, we feel like, I guess we're the owners, but we're also kind of the caregivers of this amazing establishment. And it's our job to keep it going and to improve upon things and to make it sort of last for another 26 years at least. So when Elektra came into Congeniality, it was very much a collaboration in a way. So she had her role, we had our role, and we all kind of worked towards a greater good. So then when we were on Drag Race together, it was sort of the same. It was like a collaboration in a way. Obviously, we're sort of individually working towards winning this competition, but it was sort of that whole boss and employee thing. It's never really been a thing as such. Yes, technically we are the boss and we get to be like, oh, you need to wash your tights and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was never so. At least for me, it was never really an issue. And then Elektra, actually, she doesn't work with us anymore. After Drag Race, she kind of went her own way and decided to be a RuPaul's Drag Race superstar, as we all have kind of tried to do. And so it's a shame because she was really fantastic at Congeniality. But yeah, it just kind of felt like we were three Kiwis and united in our Kiwiness and trying to take on these Aussies.
Yeah, it was nice to have the representation of the Kiwis, not just having the Australians, because obviously it's called Down Under. So I always wondered why wasn't it called Australia, and then when I saw the cast, I was like, it's because they're also bringing New Zealand, which is really nice because like why not? You know, New Zealand is just as important as Australia and everything, and drag is still just as valid. So obviously the name of my channel is Drag Tea Served. I was wondering if you could serve us some drag tea, and if you could tell us something from behind the scenes or something that wasn't shown on set on camera that you wish had, or maybe some sort of drama that happened that you'd share with us.
Yeah, well, the one that comes to mind, it's sort of not shady or anything, but Coco Jumbo is one of the funniest people I've ever met. So off camera we had this little green room, and so that's kind of like a holding pen. I think they would have that on sort of all TV shows really, and we just sort of would sit there like the cameras, we would film something in the workroom and like, cool, we're gonna break for lunch, go to the green room, we sit there, and we weren't allowed to talk because they do the same on Drag Race and reality TV, hard ice and soft ice. So hard ice is when you can't say anything to anyone, and soft ice is when you can talk about things like the weather. I watched a movie once, that sort of stuff, but nothing to do with the show. So we would be on hard ice because we always talk to each other, and Coco Jumbo would just make us laugh so much, and it was to the point that it was like getting awkward because the Queen Care would sort of tell us off for talking, and then we would burst out laughing. So every time somebody would open a door, Coco would go, like she had it was just the worst thing in the world. But I think one of the best things we did, which is super sort of illegal and Drag Race, but we were in a hotel and all on the same floor, and we would go and get out at dinner, and sometimes we would be able to sneak out and kind of sit with each other in the lobby and have like a debrief of the day, which is super bad, where we just sort of sit there on the floor of the lobby and be like, oh, wasn't today a wild, right? Like, it's so illegal. But we just kind of like, not that we snuck out of our rooms, it was just we happened to fall in line. But hopefully my contract can't sue me still. The problem is with me, I'm such a goody two-shoes, so I was like following the rules to a T. And then you kind of like, because we would go out in our rooms, sometimes they would knock on our door and be like, your dinner's here, and sometimes they would forget, or we'd have to go into the lobby and be like, is my food here? And so once I went out into the lobby, and then there was about like 5 drag queens sitting down on the floor eating their dinner and having a chat. And I'm like, what is my joy? They can't fire us all, can they? Well, you wait now, we're going to be all over Reddit. Anita Wigl'it sued from World of Wonder for eating pizza in a corridor.
I think that's really nice, like sweet and like a funny story, because you still gave us great TV. So I think it doesn't matter whether the queens kind of hang out. I know they do that, but I think if you still give us great TV, then who cares? Like it's a human trait to want to be with people and have like a bit of fun with your friends. So I don't think they can blame you for that.
We had a lot of fun.
But it's really interesting you said about Coco Jumbo, because on the show it wasn't shown that she was really like funny. I'm sure she was, but it's interesting to hear that, because on the show she was always, I feel, portrayed as being really sweet and nice, but kind of quite unsure of herself, almost a little, because she went home relatively early. We never really saw that side of her.
Yeah, which is such a shame, and I think that's one of the hard things about reality TV in general, whether it's Drag Race or anything, and that if you go home in the first couple of episodes, or even up to sort of episode 3 or 4 or whatever, it's a fact you don't have as much airtime as the other ones. And so people like Coco, and also it's hard sometimes because you see someone on TV and they can be completely different on TV than they are in real life, and that could be good and bad, because sometimes you see someone on TV and you're like, oh, I love that person. Well, like, I love Anita, and then you meet me in person, like, oh, she's horrible. So Coco she is the soul and the life of a party. So on the show, obviously, we weren't partying, so we were kind of on TV and being a bit proper for the first couple of episodes. But my gosh, Coco Jumbo knows how to party. She is outrageous, and she's just so much fun. And it's a shame that kind of didn't come out as much in her 2 episodes, because it would be hard to portray. But I absolutely recommend, if you're in Sydney or if you're booking drag queens around the world, she is just so much fun.
She seemed really fun on the show as well. Like, we didn't get to see all of it, but what we did see, I thought she seemed really sweet and everything. So one thing I was going to ask, because we you touched on the hotel, we talked about that a minute ago. Obviously, the show was filmed in Australia, and no, it wasn't. The show was filmed in New Zealand, is what I meant.
That's okay.
It was filmed in New Zealand, even though most of the queens obviously came from Australia, is what I meant to say. Obviously, the way that it normally is portrayed, that you sort of are in the hotel room and then you go home, but your season was during COVID. So I was just wondering, when you got eliminated, did you have to stay in the hotel the whole time, or were you allowed to go home afterwards?
So for us, Australians and New Zealanders, we were sent home basically straight afterwards. So we didn't do a official promo shoot for this one. So basically, once we were eliminated, we just went home. So I live still about a sort of a 15-minute drive from the hotel to my house. So we basically packed all of my drag into a van and got dropped off at home, and then had to unpack everything again. And it's funny, so I live in Auckland in a suburb called Grey Lynn, and the studio where at least season 1 was filmed is in Grey Lynn. So it's literally, I could walk to the studio from my house, which is quite hilarious.
I do kind of wonder that, because obviously it was filmed in Auckland, and that's obviously the main centre of New Zealand. It's the biggest city by far and everything. So I did kind of always assume that if you're an Auckland queen, you must be really close, because it's not a very big country.
Oh, and Peter and Elektra are both Auckland-based as well, so we were really just round the corner. And it felt so the poor Australians had to do 2 weeks of quarantine, and we didn't have to do any quarantine, so it was great. We just went to the hotel one or two nights before filming, and was straight into it, really.
Yeah, that was why I was curious, because obviously you had a mix of people from different countries, which doesn't happen very often on Drag Race normally, apart from like All Stars and stuff. Normally it's just one country, so I guess it's slightly easier. So I'd love to move on to some questions from my subscribers, if I may. I had lots of questions from people. Most of them telling that you shouldn't have gone home that soon. So the first actual question was, how did she develop such a positive and great outlook on life? Her spirit is why I love her so much, and of course, how great a competitor she was.
Thank you. That's such a lovely compliment. And I have always been sort of positive, but I think it kind of originated from something quite bad in a way. So we touched on before that I was born in England and I lived there for 10 years. But the reason why we moved to New Zealand, at least my mum, my brother and I, is because my parents separated in England and we lived in quite a small town. So to stay, we would have kind of bumped into my dad all the time. And if he had a new girlfriend, it's never a good thing for like a small town too, because of the gossip, the rumour mill and stuff. So we kind of moved to New Zealand, and after that it was quite interesting with my brother and myself, because we kind of went the opposite ways. When something negative happens, I think there's two ways you can think about it. You can either think negatively, so everything kind of becomes a bit of a worry, like, oh, you kind of doom cut. And my brother, to a point, kind of like, it's a little bit like that, a lot more sort of, not negative as a person, he's wonderful and so funny, but he's very sort of cautious about things and protective. And myself, I kind of went the other way and tried to find any sort of glimmer of hope and hold on to it. So, like, oh, we're moving to New Zealand. Oh, cool. It'll be a new experience, that sort of stuff. And I think that's always followed me through life, especially because I went to an all-boys Catholic high school where sort of bullying was a huge thing, being sort of what felt like the only gay person there. And so always kind of clinging to sort of the positives of like, well, I really enjoy music at high school and things like that. And it's just kind of taken me into later life. And I'm a normal person, so I do kind of not get sort of overly negative, but there's moments that I'm not always sort of positive and really happy, especially if you ask my staff at Khaleesi when I'm telling like, you really need to wash your ties. So there's moments when you kind of have to be a bit more sort of less bubbly and less positive. But I kind of also, when I'm in drag, I love to have that energy because it's so sort of uplifting. And I do drag because I want to make people happy and I want to make them smile and be silly and enjoy themselves. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think you definitely always came across as being like one of those super happy people, and obviously, like they say, happiness, that kind of attitude often comes from a potentially negative or traumatic event, but you've kind of spun that into a positive, and I think you always came across as being a lovely, like, sweet, happy person, and like you always had a smile regardless, and I think that's a nice trait to have. Not enough people have that trait, I think.
Just don't ask my husband if it's actually true, because he'll tell you it's not. He'll be like, oh, he's always grumpy.
Well, you can't be happy all the time, I suppose. But, I mean, at least when the camera's on.
Exactly. I'm genuinely most of the time I am. Because I think in life, no matter the situation, we've all been through bad situations, I'm sure. And there's always, no matter how hard a situation in life can get, there's always a glimmer of hope and something to kind of focus. And if you can try and focus on that, I feel that can do sort of wonders for you and take you onto the next level. Oh, I sound like RuPaul, don't I? You should start calling me Oprah.
You'll be after his job next.
I know. Can you imagine that? Oh, welcome to Drag Race Down Under, hosted by Anita Wigl'it. What's the world coming to?
That would be great. I would watch that.
If Nikki Doll can do France, I can do New Zealand.
One of the other questions was, so on the show you did talk a little bit about that you're in the Navy band. Someone asked, how was your experience as a gay man or drag queen when you were in the New Zealand Navy? Do you agree that military uniforms are themselves a form of drag?
Oh, I've never heard that really before. So for me, in the Navy, so I'm in the Royal New Zealand Navy, and I'm technically still in there. I was in the band the band, the way it works in New Zealand, I think most militaries around the world, if not all. So if you're in the band, it's sort of like you're in the Navy and the branch you're in is the band. So you can swap, you can go from the band to being a Navy diver, where you have to do all the fitness, which I'm not into. But so for me, I'm sort of fully immersed in the Navy, and I did basic training, and I loved it to a point. And it was sort of like an interesting experience in the Navy, because what happens in New Zealand, actually in the New Zealand military, is they've got it so right. They really celebrate diversity, and they think they sort of we do things like have a group called Overwatch, which is sort of a rainbow community group within the military, and it's sort of a time for us to celebrate our differences, really, and also our similarities. And by having that diversity in a place that the Navy and the military in New Zealand really understand that through people's own experiences, they have unique viewpoints. And so that helps create a stronger team, because we have different ways of thinking, so we can explore all the options. So I've never felt any homophobia at all in the Navy, and they knew I was gay, they knew I was a drag queen before entering. And let's face it, the Navy is the gayest armed force, and the band is the gayest branch of the gayest armed force. So I remember on my first day when I signed the dotted line to join the Navy, one of the senior chief in the Navy was like, "Look, I understand you're gay, and I get that. So, but I don't really understand about the drag thing." And so I explained it to him about the dressing up. And he's like, "I understand. Next minute, we're doing in the Navy, dressed up as the village people at a band concert." So they totally understood. And then the second half of the question about the military uniform being drag, totally. I love putting on my uniform. It's so like, it kind of brings out a different character, as drag does. So the drag for me kind of gives me another layer of confidence, because people aren't judging Nick, which is my boy name, but they're judging Anita. And it's like, well, Anita's a fictional character to a degree, so it can't hurt you. Whereas in the Navy, when you put your uniform on, you kind of feel like, ooh, I feel so fancy. Even like, I can feel like I'm sitting up like, so it's definitely drag. You've got all these shiny medals, and you've got like, oh, nice shiny shoes. It's like, what's not to love? Just maybe like a little bit of a kitten heel would be quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. I've always thought that military outfits, or outfits of any kind, are kind of like drag in a way, because you are kind of a different persona, and you're all kind of this group thing together of looking the same, or kind of having some kind of similarity. I always think it is kind of like drag, but maybe slightly less sparkle.
And it's kind of like a little bit camp in some ways, if you think about it. Like all of these lovely sort of people dressed in their uniforms, all matching in sync. It's like, and like the Navy uniforms in particular are like little sailor outfits. They're so cute. It's like, how can you not enjoy this?
Definitely, I agree. It was a very good question. I was thinking kind of the same thing.
Yes.
Someone else asked, is there going to be season 3 of House of Drag?
Oh, I hope that there will be one day. It's a little bit hard because Warner Brothers did House of Drag season 1 and season 2, and TVNZ, our sort of main TV company here, and they also do RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under now. So I think House of Drag might have seen its last day, and because Drag Race has taken its place. But I live in hope. I hope that Keita and I, if House of Drag doesn't work, then Keita and I hopefully will get to do something together in the future, whether that's through WoW or through anything. We love working together, and I'm sure this isn't the end of our duo.
No, I definitely hope not. Someone asked, how is drag in New Zealand different from other countries, and how has the culture in New Zealand influenced the way that you do drag?
Well, I think New Zealanders in general are very easygoing, very relaxed, silly, up for a good time. We have a huge binge drinking culture in New Zealand, so that helps as well. And I think that kind of influences our drag in the sense that we're all quite easygoing, relaxed and fun, and just up for a good time and to sort of enjoy ourselves. So I think that's probably a little bit of a cultural sort of difference of drag. Other than that, I honestly think that New Zealand and Australia, we're kind of similar in our drag, in that we kind of have these big foam wigs, and we love a bit of a sequin dress, where we just kind of love the kind of that creative, large Priscilla kind of costume side of things. And I'm not sure, sort of in America and Canada and England and the UK and things like that they have sort of, I suppose, very similar aesthetics in many ways. But I don't know. I don't really know enough of the drag world really to say, because obviously, like, if Bag of Chips, for example, she would fit so well into the Down Under because she's so ridiculous. And I think we're just so stupid and we just enjoy ourselves and don't take ourselves too seriously. And that I suppose the idea of like the really beautiful drag queens who are look queens and they just take these amazing photos. We don't really have many of those in Down Under. We kind of, probably because there's not a big enough market to survive doing photo shoots. So we're just all kind of silly clowns, really, out for a good time.
Definitely. I think I've always thought that from what I mean, I've never been, unfortunately, to New Zealand. I'd love to go, but I think the culture in that sense is quite similar to England in the sense of like it's a bit more campy and it's less about the look and more about the performance and kind of being a bit silly or whatever. And I've always thought that's why with Drag Race Down Under and especially you, I kind of had an affinity because I was like, well, she reminds me of a lot of the drag queens that I've seen in England or the UK because it's that kind of campy, like you said, almost like drag clowns, like it's but in a good way.
For sure, and we would love to have you in New Zealand. We'll be waiting with our arms and our legs open.
And someone else asked, sort of on a similar thing, we were talking about different countries. Someone said, will we ever have the chance of seeing Anita here in the UK, preferably Scotland?
Oh, yeah. Well, I cannot wait to get over to the UK. I've done drag, obviously, in New Zealand and Australia and Canada and America. So the UK, I've never done drag. So I can't wait. And I'm actually coming over in January for DragCon London, which I'm very excited for. And then what I really hope to do is work with one of the cool groups like Club Kids or something and do a bit of a tour because I've got a solo show after Drag Race. I wrote a solo show called My Life as a Funny Girl where we look back on my time in England when I was a little boy and like my questionable dress-up costumes, and then to the early days of drag when Keita and I started together, and because of a particular photo where we looked awful together, and we kind of have this laugh and kind of go through my life and talk about Drag Race and that sort of stuff. So I'd love to bring that over to the UK, and hopefully I'll get the opportunity in January or early next year, and I'd love to come to Scotland because I've heard you've got deep fried pizza, and let's face it, I mean, is there anything better in the world than deep fried pizza? Probably, but I'd like to experience it firsthand.
They have deep fried everything. I think they do deep fried Mars bars, deep fried like chocolate bars. They do deep fried and iron brew. If you've ever had iron brew,
yes, and they wear kilts, and I'll be able to see if they actually do wear underwear underneath. I'll probably get arrested, but it's all science.
Well, we'd love to have you. So obviously, I would love to see you. So I'll definitely try and make it to DragCon to see you because I loved you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I'd love to get on to a quick fire round of questions that I do.
Yeah.
Some of them are drag related, some of them are not. So it's just 5 quick questions, and it's sort of quick fire, give your first answer.
Not guilty. Oh, sorry.
That's a different question. So, lipstick or lip gloss?
Lipstick.
Yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
Yes.
Favorite emoji?
Oh, the face that looks like this.
Cocktail or champagne?
Cocktail.
And can you summarise your Drag Race experience in one word?
Ooh. Splendiferous.
I'll have to check the spelling on that one, but thank you so much. I loved you on the show. I'm sure everyone loved you. We'd love to see you in whatever form it is, whether it's House of Drag, Drag Race, or even just showing up at our front door and like making us laugh. I'm sure we'd all love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I look forward to coming to your front door and banging on it to get myself in. But thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope I get to see you one day soon in London for DragCon. I'll give you a free signed photo.
Thank you. And speaking of obviously shows, where can people find you? What's your next project?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Although TikTok, I'm still learning my way around that one. On Facebook, I'm on the same at Anita Wigl'it, which is Wiglit. And basically, I'm about to embark on tours now because the COVID's kind of sort of died down a little bit. So I'm just about to embark on a New Zealand tour of my Life as a Funny Girl, doing 16 dates. And then I go over to Australia a couple of times in the middle to do some stuff with the Drag Race Down Under Season 2 premiere. And then we've got our Voss Events Drag Race Down Under Season 1 and Season 2 tour. And then it kind of brings us close to the end of the year where I hope to get over to England in January and then hopefully Vancouver in February, where I'm going to be judging a competition that I won 10 years ago when I lived there. So yes, I'll see you on the road. I'll make sure I post about all of those things and lots of silly and stories that mean absolutely nothing in this world, but will hopefully make you smile.
Well, that's exactly what we want from you. We want you to talk about things that will make us smile, even if they don't actually matter.
Most of it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And I do hope that we will see you at some point in the future in whatever form it is.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.